To the curious, the seekers, and the experts, welcome. You're listening to Poli-Psych Podcast. Today is Thursday, November 19th. We are recording at 2:19 p.m. At this present moment, America finds herself in the midst of very turbulent times. We're not in a hot war, but in a war of controversies and opinions. One of the issues facing Americans is, where do we find our news? How do we craft our reality? Where do we find information that lets us feel as if we know what's going on, and that lets us feel that we understand our world to an extent? Many legacy media outlets parrot information that is not only not verified, but verifiably false. So where do Americans learn what is really going on? If people are used to turning on the TV and finding their reality-defining information, they will probably not have a grasp on what is actually happening in our nation as the post-election events unfold. Today, we want to communicate as simply as possible how to find alternative sources of news. There are alternatives that are not difficult to access, and we are hoping to make those outlets even more accessible to a broader group of people. Ken, would you begin our discussion by highlighting some news outlets that you have found helpful?
Sure. And we'll be organizing the show in a continuum of simplicity and then getting a little more into the depth of how the shows interact. And we've got a difference between print content and broadcast content. We have podcasts, we have news aggregators and networks, and it's kind of a confusing array of portals. But we're really going to simplify it here. But we'll take the viewer and the user through it one step at a time. And I encourage people to use the what we call hyperlinks, which are direct links, just to get a quick look at the pages. There'll be a separate file that we'll post in the notes, and please share that. The intent, if we carry it off, would be to produce a series of pages that would essentially imitate the user interface of the old style television, where you could actually just turn the dial and see the number. And the simplicity, I think, is one of the best barriers to entry that network television has. People get used to using the same channels and dealing with the equipment, and many people just don't have time to deal with complexity. Nevertheless, they're completely capable of dealing with that complexity. And the purpose of the show then is to unroll this gradually and give people a look at this alternative universe, an ability to compare these people. There's a variety of opinion even within alternative media about various things. And what I'll do in the first part of the show is just point people in the right direction to a number of content providers that I use if I'm in a hurry, which is most of the time. So the first one is Zero Hedge. It's kind of an edgy source, but the benefit I see there is that I can look at their page and they'll have maybe 10 articles ranked by when they were released normally, unless it's a breaking story, which would be toward the top of the page. But if there's something going on, high impact, you'll see it there. Doesn't mean you have to read the whole story, but you'll see the headline. And I just find that very, very useful if there's a meeting or something I'm going into and I kind of want to know what's cooking. Zero Hedge. Don't read the comments if you're new, because it's kind of a zoo. And again, the content is a little edgy, and it's one of those things. You're not going to find ducks and bunnies on a lot of these channels, but you will find that you'll be on top of events in real time, as opposed to waiting for the network to program you to what they want you to see. The second link that I have everybody start with just these two and just get comfortable with these two is it's called the right side. It's not right side broadcasting. It's the first problem with this, and the reason we're putting the hyperlinks on here is because it's very hard to find these channels if some of the nuances of the names aren't made clear. So with the hyperlink, you just click on, there'll be an indication on all the documents that we'll publish. The rest of the show will be dedicated to a more in-depth view of the portals and so on, but we'll start here with that. But go ahead and click on the Liberty Daily, bookmark if you want, but you can always refer back to the sheet. And I would encourage people, the series of sheets we'll be producing, to work their way through it and to find the ones that that appeal to you. There's certain types of news presentations that would appeal to differing personalities. I think many in the MBTI community can relate to this. If you're more interested in the values oriented, you'll prefer those sources. Many times in alternative media, they will be dealing with the issues. They won't be hiding things. They won't. Sometimes you may detect a little bias, but you need that. And then go ahead and look at the other side of the world. Look at the network channels and compare and contrast. But you'll have the full picture. You can get a 360 view of what we're living through. And from there, I tend to, depending on the time of day, prefer full-scale video presentations which mimic the legacy news. And that would be the next two networks that are coming into play are OAN, which is One America News, OAN and One America News Network. We'll put a link in for that one. These, Don will explain this later. In fact, maybe just briefly, Don, is One America News a subscription service, or what's the deal with getting full coverage on that one? Or Cindy?
Well, yeah. I think it's $5 a month if you wanted to subscribe to them on Roku or some kind of a video feed subscription service. I think it's a pretty small amount, but it is a subscription to all of it, which is not to say that they don't put out things that are free, but to get everything that comes through that video streaming, there's a small monthly fee.
Yeah, now and Don will later, he'll be getting into a lot of the more advanced things about portals and that would enhance your viewing experience. But for my part, I am going to, in my sheet will be probably entitled Intro for Dummies or something of that nature, just to, it's basically a way to if you're not familiar with these portals, to start there before you move on to the others. It's not rocket science. You'll be able to probably move through all three sheets in one go once you get the hang of it. OAN and Newsmax also, I think is Don, is that also a subscription Roku kind of thing as well, or how does that work?
I'm not aware of a streaming service for Newsmax. Doesn't mean there might not be one. There is America's Voice, which is something similar, but I don't know of a streaming service for Newsmax.
Newsmax does have a Roku app.
Don, what was the one you mentioned?
America's Voice is another one, and that's the one that Steve Bannon is appearing on daily now.
Okay, yeah, I'll add that to the intro list as well. Again, the document, you'll see that I call it the grade school, maybe, or we'll come up with a name, but you'll see a series of attachments that will address each one as we go through it. The other one I highly recommend is, let's see, looking at my list here, is Right Side Broadcasting, and they handle a lot of the live site work that goes on. They were covering the President Trump rallies pretty closely, and they'll be covering a lot of things coming up. Probably if there's a press conference, sometimes if it's a special event, they'll cover that. And it's not a conventional news broadcast. It's definitely oriented more towards site work and live streaming and that kind of thing. I'll just interject. You will, in many cases, feel better about yourself if you give them a little bit of a financial support. We're talking in most cases about basically a pay-per-view versus an advertising revenue profit model or expense model in this case. I don't think none of these channels are money makers to a large extent yet. And that's one of the problems with commercial media is they're controlled by the corporate boards, and they're also, which would impact on the news presentation itself. We saw that depicted in the movie Network, how that was slowly happening and has come basically to full fruition. Almost everything in that movie is part of our daily life now. So again, I'm only a couple more to go for the intro, but I'm adding X22 to the list, and I'm kind of taking a little reach there because you're going to be getting a little more into the tinfoil crowd, for lack of a better term. But don't discount that. I found X22 to be very engaging, and very insightful and up to the minute. It's time well spent, and it's usually about the presenter's name is Dave, and he's gone through a series of censorship events, and that's another reason I'm putting this on the list, because I think that will happen to a lot of the other channels that will be discussed later in the show, and possibly some of the ones that I'm mentioning, is you'll have to track and watch where they go when corporate media starts to really, unroll the censorship, which is probably going to come as President Trump gets closer to assuming his second term takes place, and it's starting to look like that's going to happen. Many people are going to be very upset about that, and at the same time, we'll see and that'll be accompanied by a wave of censorship like we haven't seen before. Even though it's bad now, it could get much, much worse. So X22 has gone through that evolution. They're on their own server, and again, I'm encouraging financial support for them. I subscribed, and I think it was only $30 or something like that for a whole year. So they're set up on their own website, which is the probably the highest level of security at this point. So I'm putting it on my list, and it may not be for everyone, but again, it's a very presentable and useful half hour, 45 minutes that every day I watch it. And just in parting on this intro, I would say that from an ethical standpoint, you divert any money you're spending on cable television. I know it may be difficult with the sports and some of the other things, but there are the rabbit ears receivers that you can buy for $20 or $30, and you can get the legacy rabbit ear, what we call the rabbit ear channels. So you will have all three networks if you really need them, including PBS. But frankly, even just from an objective perspective, you're definitely not getting the whole picture from legacy news. Even, sad to say, Fox used to be sort of the middle of the road, but they've also gone down the road of bias, and their viewership has fallen off. Transfer that money, that financial energy, put that toward your favorite alternative media people. It may be a little more complicated, but this is the price of truth. And with that, I'll pass it off to our next level. We're moving to basically going through the stages. These, again, to summarize mine, this is sort of the intro, the appetizer stage. Become familiar with these sites, and we'll try to update our spreadsheets or whatever sheets you'll see them connected, probably numbered consecutively or something to indicate number one. So I'm completing the number one stage one phase, and I'll pass it off to the next step.
One of the great concerns recently has been the number of patriot alternative news people who have been kicked off of Twitter and of YouTube. And I was trying to think of a better phrase than kicked off, but I don't know that there is a sophisticated way to express what has happened to these people. And I have a list that is not comprehensive, but it covers many of the people who were quite popular, who have been removed from YouTube. Some of them are still on YouTube, such as You Are Free TV, but they have lost their Patreon accounts. So these are people who are being pretty actively persecuted, and I think that's an effective word to use, by social media, but particularly YouTube and Patreon also, because this affects the ability of people to communicate. And of course, we ourselves have been disenfranchised of our Twitter account, our original Twitter account, where we had several thousand followers, and we had to start over again. So we've experienced this ourselves to a certain extent, but some of these people on YouTube had well into the hundreds of thousands of subscribers. So, and they used to get a decent income from the YouTube people donating money, and also just the ad revenue from YouTube. So this is a significant attack, and many people who have been following alternative media for some time have developed favorites, and I know I have mine, and most of mine are no longer on YouTube. So I created a spreadsheet to help people find the YouTubers that perhaps they were following before the people were removed from YouTube. I hope this is helpful, and I have included what type of videos the people produce, where their videos can now be seen, their web address, and their contact information, and where they are on social media, as well as how followers can donate to them if they so desire. So one small thing that I will mention before I pass off the baton is that there are some tremendous bigger networks coming out that have great potential. As Ken mentioned, Newsmax, OANN, and there is Steve Bannon, the network that Steve Bannon is with, America's Voice. I think it's great that, and RSBN too, of course. I think it's great that some of these networks are building something to compete with what people are accustomed to. However, I do have concerns that if these networks are successful, they have potential at some point in the future to turn into the behemoths that we have now, that we are trying to free ourselves from, like CNN, NBC, MSNBC, the networks. I'm hoping very strongly that we do not create another set of networks for people to watch. And one of the reasons I value some of these YouTubers on this spreadsheet so much is because they are completely independent. They're not a part of a network. And this is actually what we endeavor to do with Poli-Psych as well. We are simply Americans who have concerns, and we hope to effectively express our concerns and help our nation, help guide our nation into a brighter future. And we here do that in a fairly small way at this time. But again, some of these people had hundreds of thousands of followers and subscribers on YouTube. So these people have been very, very effective communicators. And my personal hope is that they will not be overshadowed by some of the networks that are beginning to gain a little bit of steam. So that pretty much expresses what I wanted to share, although I do have some practical tips on how to stream that I can include at the end.
Okay, this is Don. So we'll move on from there. And one of the lay of the land kind of things I want to point out here, and getting back to our psychological orientation, is that being different Enneagram types operating out of three different centers, the three of us are approaching this topic in different ways. And that's what we think is valuable. Ken, as a 9, seeks to make sure that everybody's included and wants to not leave anyone in the dust, and wants to make sure that there is a broad and level playing field. And Cindy wants to appeal to those that are of the heart center, that want to make sure they're able to connect with the heart of what's going on and don't get tracked by propaganda, but are actually able to do a real, sincere connection. And me, Don, as a 5, I'm want to take a look at drill down all the way down, get into the nitty gritty and the depths, but I don't want to lose sight of the big picture either. So that's where I'm coming from. And personally, I've been in the alternative media world for a long time, basically in the alternative reality world for a long time, ever since, I would say, since I became a Christian and Ronald Reagan was elected president. I said, whoa, my world view is askew here. I'm adjusting my world view. And I sought out alternative news sources. And the internet came along, and in the 90s, I began to tune into alternative radio and the early days of the internet, find websites like Drudge Report. In the pre-show, we were saying, you know what, Zero Hedge is kind of like what the Drudge Report would be in the 90s. And I think that's kind of true. And that's one of the initial square ones that we've got going for us. But since the advent of social media in the years like leading up to 2010 and the early part of this millennium, we had Twitter and Facebook become the social media, something new, is something interactive. And many people, and myself included, believe that that's what made the election of President Trump in 2016 possible. If it wasn't for social media, he would have met with that media blockade that effectively kept Ron Paul out from going any farther. The Tea Party movement, which was actually came out of the Ron Paul movement, was basically sidelined because social media wasn't powerful enough. Now it is. Now a lot of people are on Facebook and Twitter, but what's happened is, and this happens to news throughout history, is that it gets centralized. The authority gets centralized. Well, okay, bear with my tinfoil hat here for a moment, but it sure looks to me like some of the people that have sit in the unseen seats of power, those wizards behind the curtain, anticipated this and basically had put the levers of social media control in the hands of a few people that were committed to steering the collective thought process in the direction they wanted it to go. Well, President Trump got in anyway, but now they're trying to close the barn door so they can basically try to keep him out from a second term. And what's that actually doing, because it's too little too late and you can't unsee things, is that as the big tech censorship comes down around Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, there are alternatives popping up. And this is my segment of the show, just to help people become familiar with what those alternatives are and the general look and feel of them as compared to Twitter and Facebook. And I'm going to assume right here that if you're paying attention to this part of the show, that you're somewhat familiar with Twitter and Facebook. And so some of the new things I'll compare to them. And of course, YouTube, as the YouTube is the video platform. Facebook is kind of, the family sharing, media, pictures, political, everything, grab bag. Twitter is very much concise and one-liners and not so much graphically oriented. But based on that, then one of the first alternative medias that blazed its own trail outside of the confines of censorship in the early days of censorship of those tech giants was Gab. And Gab has been a very effectively breaking new ground in terms of both technical platform abilities and their building their user community amid many censorship obstacles. And in the early days, they were, I would say, ineffectively branded as being right-wing Nazis, and that typical slanderous accusation was leveled at Gab, very much associated with the Charlottesville Very Fine People hoax that we've exposed on this show. And but Gab has become a very effective censorship-free environment where you can get a lot of information. Then there's Parler, which has a lot of the big-name conservatives on there, people that are usually well-known to Fox viewers, Hannity, other people like that, Tucker. They all have Parler accounts. So Parler is an effective replacement for Twitter. Gab is an effective replacement for all three, Twitter, Facebook, and Reddit. And I haven't mentioned Reddit yet, but that was kind of a third one of the original social media platforms. But so we've got Gab is new, Parler's new. I also mentioned CloutHub, and there's another one, MeWe, which is a new Facebook alternative. I personally haven't experienced that one. All the others I have. There's one called WeGo, and that's like a Facebook alternative for QAnon groupies, people that are really into Q. And then messaging apps like Telegram, that's basically an alternative to WhatsApp or simple Facebook or other messaging platforms that is actually secure. If you don't know, any kind of Facebook messaging is very invasive to your privacy. I would stay away from that at all costs and look into something like Telegram. Also Signal. I didn't put Signal on the list, but that's a great way to communicate securely with friends and family. It's pretty easy to install on your phone, your smartphone. Then I want to also mention the YouTube alternatives, BitChute and Rumble. Rumble, new on the horizon there, seems to be pretty effective, and we're all fans of Dave and X22, and he's most effective on Rumble. Now, he's on multiple platforms, but he did have trouble with CloutHub, and I personally like CloutHub a lot because one of the things that I like to do is to share news media from many different websites and news sources onto a platform. And I don't want to copy a link and paste it, navigate to another page and then paste it in there. I use iOS sharing. Means that on a Mac platform or an Apple mobile device platform, I can easily share news articles to CloutHub. Now, Parler also allows me that capability, but I've noticed some network issues with CloutHub that just don't seem to, with Parler that just don't seem to be there with CloutHub. So there's a lot of information here in the new world, and I would encourage people that are already familiar with Twitter and Facebook and YouTube to investigate these other alternatives, because you won't know you're being censored if they do it slowly, surreptitiously, like they have been. Sometimes people you don't know about are the ones that get censored, and then they're gone, and you never got to hear about them. But they will be found on places like Rumble. Let's say, for instance, Dinesh D'Souza, great conservative voice filmmaker, has a very active Rumble channel, and I'm pretty sure he was censored on YouTube, and I think he was cut off there. So this is happening. This is real. We're in a transition point to new media, and we want to make it possible for you to navigate these waters. And I've prepared a little spreadsheet here which has some of the features of each of these different platforms on them, and including what the general culture is of each of those. You can look and see what I've said about each of these. These are just kind of my impressions, both as a technical person and as somebody that is an active user of these platforms. I'm looking forward to investing some time into seeing what MeWe is about. It's basically an uncensored Facebook. So we will check that out and look forward to helping you. If anybody has any questions here on our YouTube page, post the question there. We'll interact with you. We'll help get you going, point you in the right direction.
Thanks, Don. That was great. I think we'll look at also, or I'll encourage people to always visit the site if you take the time to read the spreadsheet, especially, and just get familiar with the landing page. Some landing pages are more inviting to certain personality types, and we all have our preferences for media, and which it raises another point. I think, yes, we are dealing with information and learning, but we're trying to also make it fun and an enjoyable experience, a sensory experience that doesn't include a lot of confusion if your preferences run in that direction. I know in the MBTI world, we have a vast difference in how people take in information, and there's so much variety here that there's something for almost everyone. But bookmark, find the site. If you find that, we'll always put a hyperlink in for everything we reference, and it'll be indicated in some form, fairly obviously on the pages. And we will try to update them as things change going forward to make these sheets very valuable. We encourage you to share them with people, again, as hyperlinks. I know that a lot of content providers just rattle off all these great websites. They'll talk about it, and then what do you do a day later? Because everything's got to be designed to be shared. This is the hive. The power of alternative media is in making everyone capable of becoming a content provider in some form, especially in your own social groups. Is share articles with people that you think, because you'll know your people better than anyone, better than the mass media would. I found just from personal experience that Amazing Polly tests very well with audiences that may be completely unfamiliar with the other side of life as far as media goes. And usually the most effective conversions will happen if you can dial into that that sort of compatibility. So Don or Cindy, it looks to me like we have, as I was listening, I was trying to sort of develop a framework. We've got social media infrastructure, which would be interactive, right? Like Parler and things that basically replace Twitter, because Twitter is pretty much gone. I think it will be effectively shut down. And the other one would be content providers. Cindy referenced the value of independence, but there are content providers that branch off into another realm where they become. Steve Bannon's a good example, where he'll have his own base or portal, but then he'll appear on all these other networks. Then we've got broadcast portals, which are the news providers. Basically they're aggregating broadcast media. And I left out the first two that I shared because they're sort of like training wheels, the headlines, the aggregators. But then the last one, it appeared more evident when I was listening to Don, is the last category are basically utility channels, which are sort of in that realm of Roku is an example. It's not a network, but it's a facilitator of networks. And I think those four, you'll be able to craft your own. The listener will be able to craft their own network of how they want to interact with the information world, and put that together in a package that's complementary. It covers the full spectrum and essentially replaces the programming. It's a horrible word when you think about it, that they're actually programming people. So based on, are those the four categories, again: social media, content providers, portals for broadcast, and then utility portals. Is there something more to add to that characterization?
Well, let me look at it from this angle. I'm thinking interactive versus, receiving only. And we've all got these big, cheap, flat screen TVs now. And are we here on this show now saying, well, if you really want freedom, you're going to have to look at the small screen on your computer and not look at this nice big flat screen anymore? Well, actually, no. Yeah, you want to interact with social media. You want to actually connect with people who have their own thoughts and analysis to make sure you stay in let's call it a somewhat real world, because it's still, there are some bots out there and it's somewhat controlled, and it's not the same as going down to the store and talking to live walking around flesh and blood, but you've got interactiveness on social media, Twitter replacements, whatever they might be. But you also say in the evening, you want to sit down and you want to watch a show. You want to find out, you want to have some entertainment as well as news. And there are streaming services that are actually available. Roku is one, and the Fire Stick is another, associated with Amazon, of course. And there are actually a lot of channels that have old TV shows that are pretty good that you might not have seen. And for a long time, Cindy and I have, probably over 10 years now, we've mostly watched streaming entertainment in the evenings, and it is completely commercial free. And we really appreciate that. And going back to some of the news networks now that get some of the revenue from commercials, like the America's Voice that we were just mentioning earlier. It's kind of funny to go back to commercials and you see the My Pillow guy every 10 minutes or whatever. But you can get a lot of commercial-free entertainment via Roku and Amazon Fire Stick, and that's something that's very valuable. I want to encourage people to get away from the cable TV network that's very controlled.
Yeah, I would say in conclusion that high spotting is good. Even myself, I've never been a consumer of Roku, or I don't have Fire Stick, but I think I'll put that on my list of things to procrastinate, things to do. But if I see the hyperlink, there I go. I'm going to go there and get right on that if there's interest on that. But what I would say, though, in conclusion, is that I think the process of viewing things on the computer is more for our individual edification, but introducing, as Don was pointing out, getting it on a big screen TV is better. Let's say you have someone who's moderately receptive and you decide to show them a amazing Polly or whatever, see you see something that would appeal to this person or this group or whatever. It gives you that ability, and that's what's, I think, lacking on the right. If I am here to criticize in any way, I think the right's been somewhat ineffective on a social level, and we've absorbed a lot of social abuse for being supporters of President Trump. Not all of us started that way, and I think we've endured it. But the left is actually very good at the what I call, on the negative side, the mob-oriented activity. But it's become almost socially obligatory to be a Trump hater. And what do? We don't say anything. And most of the time, some of us do. But we need to I think the right needs to get much more effective at evangelism, media evangelism. But they need to do it right. You can't just start someone off with looking at Q posts, because they'll shut down. You need to start with, or wherever you want to end up, at least start with something that really interests the viewer, and in a sincere way. Not that you're trying to, dictate your agenda, but it's just you give them a perceptual experience that broadens their view of the world, and that is sorely lacking especially in the blue state regions where I live. Especially, most of these sources are completely out of reach to almost everyone, regardless of political affiliation. And that's why the media has so much power. They've got a monopoly on on the eyeballs, and you can only watch one thing at a time. And they know better than anything how to crowd out the competitors through a combination of censorship and prurient interest, or whatever you want to call it, production value. And we need to rise up if we want to succeed going forward, is perfect our own game and evolve alternative media with some of the same values and quality and focus, and make it an easy and enjoyable experience to become more enlightened about where we are in the world.
And I think I would like to mention, in light of all that, utilities, Roku and Fire Stick, can be adjusted. Well, this app that can go on your smartphone permits a person to, and there are many of these. I'm not endorsing this one in particular. You can go find whatever one appeals to you more, whatever the interface you like better. But you can actually screencast any online video using the URL of the video to your TV. And again, this helps with the production. It looks better on a big TV. It helps with being social. You can play whatever you want on your big TV if you have company or whatever. And I have some screenshots of this app, and I'm adding some text to them so that it becomes obvious how to use the app, which might not be obvious just looking at it. And I think that as we move forward, the three of us are fairly convinced that, I don't want to say the election results are going to be overturned, because I don't think that's really accurate. I believe that what's going to happen is that the true results of the election are going to become known. And as that occurs, it is going to send a shockwave through our country. People are going to realize that election fraud is not new. In fact, I've heard many accounts recently that JFK was probably elected through fraud that was perpetrated in Chicago. So as we as Americans realize that the fundamental thing that we have believed about our democracy, that we choose our own leaders, as we realize that is false and has been false for a very long time, people are going to be rocked by that news, and everyone's going to be trying to find information, what is really happening. I think there's going to probably be a stampede away from legacy media once people realize how extensively and pervasively they've been lied to. So in preparation for that, those of us who are aware of alternative media, I think Ken has great foresight to realize that we need to make alternative media as palatable as possible. And one way to do it is to screencast any online video to a television set. And I'll walk through, probably just with text, how to do that. And as Ken mentioned, all of this information is going to be on our website. We will have most of the links in the notes on YouTube, but that the notes section of YouTube will not permit for a really good presentation. So please do visit our website to really become familiar with some of this information.
Thanks, Cindy. And I want to mention one more tool that kind of falls outside of the categories we've discussed so far that I've used and you've used in the past quite extensively, and that's in generic terms, a news reader. And the one that I've become the most partial to is called Feedly, and it's an RSS feed news reader that enables you to pull in news from any number of designated outlets. You can put in Zero Hedge, Gateway Pundit, whatever you want. You and I in our Feedly feed, we have, I think, upwards of 200 or more. And Feedly is now you have to pay a certain small monthly fee, but I had mine news sources in there before they started charging that. But it's a great way to actually not have to go one place. We're creatures of habit. We say, okay, I'm going to get my important news from my friends on Facebook, and they'll let me know what's going on. Or, you distrust the mainstream outlets. You find whatever you like best, and you tend to stay there. Well, my brain and psyche is wired a little differently than that. I never like to feel that I'm locked in any one place. And having a newsreader that goes to multiple sources, I feel like I've got the world at my fingertips, and then I can easily share those news sources from that I find headlines and to all the different social media sites where I've got accounts, which is basically all of them. And that's how I don't get pigeonholed. If you think about that old analogy of the animal, the pigs, how do you catch a wild pig? That old story of, you put in one fence at a time, and pretty soon you're locked in there, and you know that the food is there, and you always go there. And then they put the one fence, the two, and then the final side is closed, and they've got four walls around you, and you can't get out. Any social media platform is potentially that. And that's why Dave of X22 is on multiple platforms. He makes a point of it for just that reason. So I encourage you also to investigate news readers like Feedly that take a simple RSS feed, and you can scan through a bunch of headlines and then post them wherever you want on whatever social media. So that's kind of you don't have to just decide between all these multiple options. You can use them all. It takes a while to acquire some expertise to be able to do that. But we're basically moving from a very narrow focus where we've been fed what they wanted to feed us into unlimited opportunities. So we need tools to manage those. And that's just one that I wanted to put on the end to help us see that you have it. You can do it all.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it. And we'll try to make it as easy as possible. But thanks for listening. If you're still if you've heard the whole show, we'll follow through and provide. But we do again encourage sharing as well. I've had some good luck already just sharing some links with people and people that need to know what's going on, because truly, as both Cindy and Don mentioned, we're entering some rough times ahead as far as information goes, and we'll need to be able to react quickly. And I think alternative media has been doing a stellar job of adjusting. But if you don't know where to look, you won't find it. So, but thanks for listening, and Cindy, I'll pass it off to you.
Well, I do. Just one little thing about Feedly. With Feedly, if you missed the Drudge Report, with Feedly you can create your own news aggregator with whatever sources you choose. So that can be very helpful. So we do thank you for joining us for this episode. And we ask that if you have enjoyed this episode, please click like. We request that you follow us on Twitter. We request that you subscribe to us on BitChute and on YouTube. And ask for notifications if you're interested. You never want to miss a show. And as we stated earlier, this information is on our website. So we do invite you to visit our website. Once again, thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care.